Kolento versus BoarControl is our match that's coming up, and as we set it up, BoarControl, I think the match means a little bit more to him in this regard than it does for Kolento, at least from an outside perspective. Kolento has a 1-0 start. He's got a solid deck here. You know, to me, it's not really too much to lose about this, but with BoarControl having the bold choice of Hunter and potentially being on the brink of 0-2, that is not the kind of start that you're going to want with this Hunter deck.
I fully agree. I think both in the immediate and also long term, this means a lot to BoarControl. His Hunter deck, as we can see here, has really been performing miserably. Against the onslaught of Bomb Warriors that we've seen here in Week 1 of Grandmasters, it really just hasn't been able to close the game out. I think you and I both agree on the actual late game strategy, if you don't find Zul'jin, really does feel lacking. But I think the other thing for BoarControl is that last year, despite being one of the highest point earners in the HCT tour stop system, he didn't really get a big HCT win, only getting the win in a Seat Story, I believe, was his big victory that year. And so within the actual HCT or this year Grandmasters format, he's still looking to get a big reputation for himself, I think it's fair to say.
Something that I look at with this deck is I'm really worried about being able to fight off against a big Conjurer's Calling turn. You have Deadly Shot for a lone giant, but how do you handle two big ones at once? You know, I look at Rat Trap as being a way to have an aggressive push early and be able to back it up in the face of Kolento, perhaps going for a Mana Cyclone turn.
Yeah.
But outside of that, I feel like this deck is going to have a lot of trouble handling, you know, looking at Kolento's deck list, a big Conjurer's Calling turn. I honestly, I'm very worried for BoarControl because of that.
I am indeed. I think that he will be struggling to deal with, like you said, the really wide boards. His strategy, therefore, is much more focused on disruption of the game plan from Kolento, making sure he kills those giants as soon as they hit the board. And also, aside from disruption, just focusing on his own game plan. This deck can play pretty aggressive when you've got the 2 kill commands in there, as well as the Timberwolf plus the Unleash the Hounds combo that you can go for to push a huge amount of damage if they're not finding those taunts.
So I feel like more proactive game plan is going to be a necessity here for BoarControl. All right, well, game number 1 is ready and set. That means we're going to go. Kolento versus BoarControl. And Kolento not going to be on coin, as Fino so eloquently put it in his interview after he had won with Mage, that he felt comfortable because of coin. Well, I had coin. That's what made me feel comfortable.
Yes, indeed. As you can see there, Kolento throwing away the Mountain Giant, which you would pretty much, I think it's fair to say, never do while you are on the coin. You can pretty much always guarantee that coming down turn 5, absolute latest, but a lot of the time turn 4. Whereas on the coin, going for some of the more support cards in the deck, like drawing off of Luna, Sorcerer's Apprentice plus Mana Cyclone, is generally what you're looking to do a little bit more, especially when the Hunter deck can get off to these aggressive starts.
So what kind of hands would Kolento have where Mountain Giant without coin is a keep, for instance?
I would keep it if you have an Arcane Intellect in hand. Even just a Banana Buffoon, of which he keeps 2, really helps to bolster up your hand size a little bit. And even if you just have Conjurer's Calling in hand, that combo of Giant plus Conjurer's Calling is so powerful that even if it doesn't come down until turn 7 or even turn 8, it's worth considering holding on to, just because it ends the game on the spot.
All right, BoarControl leading off with Shimmerfly. And I was about to say, I have a sneaking suspicion that Kolento, you know, every time I've watched Kolento play, one of his major focuses has been tempo in the early game. It is just pretty much always a focus of his. Like, the lesson that I remember learning early on when I was playing was, for the first 4 turns of the game, I'm just going to fight for board. And if I manage to get board control, then I'll figure out when I can get aggressive. But until then, I'm just going to put everything I can into fighting for board.
So how would he execute that plan here?
Well, one of the things I'm looking at is with Sorcerer's Apprentice and with Luna, just being able to find Mana Cyclone. So the Luna, I think just being a 2/4 is a fine minion size. And then alternatively, if it sticks to the board, it helps you dig to the key cards in your deck.
It really does.
And now that he has Sorcerer's Apprentice and Mana Cyclone, I feel like it's some way to just generate a lot of resources and fight from there. So the Luna here, I think, is just demanding of attention and then trying to play a disruption effect afterwards.
It's interesting because Luna going into turn 4 is obviously much less likely to stick because we're looking at Mark Chop primarily to take it out. Also, Dire Frenzy could have come down on this Leok in order to take it out. Whereas going into your opponent's turn 3, they can they could go for Deadly Shot, which you're very happy with. If that hits a Stargazer Luna kill command, that's not going to your face, which you're pretty happy about. I think overall this makes sense from Kolento.
And if you see one of those plays, what it means is that your opponent's also not casting a Master's Call on that turn. So
it's disruption.
Yeah.
The other way around from what we were expecting.
So now Kolento presented with a real opportunity.
Yeah, this is an interesting spot, actually, because if you were to pop off with the Mana Cyclone turn, which is obviously very appealing in this instance, Magic Trick, the card you discover, is also shuffled over to the right-hand side of your hand, which means if it costs 1 or less, he could do it and draw off Luna.
Snap Freeze.
You liking the look of Snap Freeze?
Well, it's interesting. I think Frostbolt is a better overall card,
I agree.
but Snap Freeze always interests me.
Yeah. It's better than it looks, I think. I've seen a couple of players actually tech it into their tertiary deck in Mage for the mirror.
Kolento just knew that he was getting another one. So Boar now with Unleashed Timberwolf. Curious when he wants to answer back.
I mean, it looks very juicy at the moment, the Timberwolf Unleash,
The thing is,
to just perfectly clear the board.
I'm looking at Explosive Trap, but I'm also looking at Luna
Yeah.
and a Sorcerer's Apprentice here.
If BoarControl takes these slow lines of play with Explosive Trap, Kolento can quite happily just say, all right, I won't attack face. I'll just draw my whole deck and drop a bunch of Mountain Giants.
Yeah, because for me, you have to think about where Kolento's hand sits right now. It's basically a heap of spells and then 2 mystery cards for BoarControl. And so if you let this sit here for long enough, Kolento's going to be able to take advantage of that. Wipe out the minions, give up the fact that, you know, you're effectively getting a bit of a negative edge here, and go from there. I mean, we haven't seen the Hunter deck really struggle from a value perspective. It is much more struggled from a tempo perspective.
I agree fully. And I think the other thing is that from BoarControl's perspective, while we agreed that he couldn't take it into the super late game, because he very rarely wins there, taking it to try and win on turn 6, 7, 8, or 9, or at least to pull ahead at that point, I think is reasonable if your opponent doesn't draw Giant, in which case killing their card draw in the form of Stargazer Luna is paramount to that plan.
Find that window of opportunity.
Right.
Pretty easy Dire Frenzy turn.
Yep, just has to spend his mana.
Definitely don't mind more 1 mana 4/4 rushes in my deck.
It's decent. Yeah, it's not the dream against Mage. Just because it's fairly low value, but I guess his hand is pretty expensive anyway, so if he was to find a 1-drop here off the top, you're never too sad about that.
The Dart Frog. So for Kolento, you know, we talked a lot about just playing a Giant by itself. This is not the matchup, I think, to let that rip, but if he doesn't generate some real tempo soon, he could easily find himself falling behind.
I mean, he's okay for the moment. I think he is a player who is not easily flappable. He will know when he actually needs to pull the trigger on these defensive maneuvers. And for the moment, I mean, the stall mechanisms he has are very, very powerful. Just Fireball to take out either this or the Wyvern that he's expecting next turn off Unleash the Beast. Obviously Frostbolt, the Cone of Cold as well. Just so many delaying mechanisms that allow him to stall through to that giant Conjurer's Call 1-2 punch.
Yeah, so what I look at is if he uses a spell, what that means is Giant goes up to 5 mana, and he won't be able to Conjurer's Calling next turn with Giant. So he's going to run into the Wyvern here.
Wait, if he casts 1 spell, do you mean? Well, he can go, it goes back down to 4, right? So,
Touche. In my head, he was just stuck at 6 mana for eternity. I apologize.
But he'll still hit for BoarControl. Pretty easy turns here overall. You just got to turbo out all the stats that you can on board to try and stick something. It's kind of surprising to see this Mage deck throw down removal of any sort, considering it basically entirely focuses on its own game plan and doing those disgustingly powerful maneuvers with Conjurer's Calling.
Dire Frenzy pickup for Boar last turn, too, seems really strong. Because if you get to shuffle a Wyvern in your deck, what that means is you actually have ways to handle multiple Giants.
Very good point. And what is the
oh boy, that's a Khadgar.
The actual mana cost of the Wyvern is 5, I believe, isn't it? Is the actual
I believe
minion?
so, yes. Yeah. If we could get a spectator check on that, that'd be lovely. It's rare I've had one in my hand.
Yeah, me too. But still here for Kolento. It's interesting to see him take a slower, 5/5 rush for 5.
Thanks, production.
You're the best.
Infinite magic tricks.
I mean, to be honest, on the last one, I would have been tempted by the mirror image. I think that's a fairly powerful card at this point in the game when your opponent's already expended one of their Unleash the Hounds. Just being able to stall the threats and stop them from going to your Mountain Giant. Also being able to distract a deadly shot, perhaps, with those mirror images. I was tempted off the first magic trick there just to take the mirror image.
Asterisk for hand size, perhaps? Also just the random factor. I mean, the random factor can be very relevant.
It's not bad. I just think I would have settled there for a mirror image rather than a reroll.
Well, I don't think Boar's getting in this game.
Okay.
And you see him have the grimace. This is the juice.
Yep, you kind of struggle to beat this. Drembuen turn 8 was Ragnaros. It was powerful. It was a strong card to play. This is turn 8 now.
Dang it, Khadgar. And I think that's really, one of the big talking points I had from yesterday as well. In the matchup of Orange versus Casey, Orange basically did not play Hearthstone.
Yeah.
He got beat by Casey just having the goods.
He did.
Both games. In this game, BoarControl doesn't really have a pressure opportunity versus Kolento, and Kolento has the goods. He was able to draw cards and have Khadgar, 3-cost Mountain Giant, 3-cost Mountain Giant, Khadgar into Conjurer's Calling. With this Hunter deck, you just don't beat that.
Yeah, and I think this is actually something that has been a problem in Hearthstone. Well, not a problem, but something you have to consider when deck building in Hearthstone at the top level for a long time now, actually, is that value is no longer good enough in Hearthstone. There are such powerful combos that can be achieved now. For example, this that Kolento just did is devastatingly powerful. Mechathune, for example, a lot of decks like that. The Death Knights in the previous year's rotation means that cards like Dire Frenzy, unless you're killing your opponent while you're doing it, can just be too slow. And that's exactly what's happened here for BoarControl. It's just too slow. All his value means nothing in the face of these giant threats.
I feel like Carnivorous Cube was really where that all changed.
Right, yeah.
Being able to just duplicate things. I mean, if you think about just like also allocation of minions, like Cube kind of breaks the rule. You get a third copy of something on your first cube.
Yeah.
There must be a way.
Well, I mean, I feel like that further demonstrates my point that if you were to play a bunch of value cards in a deck against Carnivorous Cube, you would just die.
Yeah.
They would just kill you. As here, I think, is that lethal with, the double Frostbolt, the natural one that he put in his deck, as well as the one off of Magic Trick. And the classic BoarControl raise of the eyebrows. That's about as much motion as you'll ever see from him.
Yeah, it's a rough start for BoarControl on this one. Kolento had the goods, and I think you really hit the nail on the head with the value thing. Is value works in a bubble against decks that have more finite potential, or their window and their ceiling isn't quite so high. It's very different. Against a deck like Rogue, value often works. Because you run them out of stuff, you get enough life total, and then you are the ones with the final cards.
Yeah.
Against a deck like Mage, that is not going to work. They have a ton of stuff that they get to do when they reach the later stages.
Yeah, the only time that you're allowed to run just hard value cards at the moment is when you're forced into it, like Elysiana, basically, in Control Warrior, where if you don't play it, you're just going to lose to the other warriors who are playing it, so you're forced into it. And you're only allowed to do that because you have such strong armor gain removal options against the aggro decks as well. It's a weird balance, but it does just feel to me at the moment that this Hunter deck is a little bit too slow to be beating those mages, but doesn't have the removal tools that Warrior has in its arsenal to take it into the late game.
I'm becoming convinced the more I see of it. I thought it was a fine choice, but I'm seeing the power turns, and it's just not stacking up very well. We're going to come back after a short break and find out if BoarControl can turn this around and make a comeback here.
Welcome to Hearthstone Masters. Today, we're going to share one of the biggest changes coming to Hearthstone in 2019, an entirely new competitive format called Specialist. Specialist will be the default competitive format for Hearthstone Masters. From online Masters qualifiers to live Masters Tour events to the pinnacle of competition, Hearthstone Grandmasters. Ready to learn how the new Specialist format works? Let's dive right in. In this new competitive format, players select 3 30-card decks to bring to a Specialist tournament. The catch? all decks must be from the same class. In this regard, Specialist is a major departure from most other competitive formats. Amongst every player's 3 Specialist decks, one is designated as the primary deck. The player's other 2 decks are designated as secondary and tertiary decks. There are no special limitations placed on a player's primary deck aside from regular Hearthstone deck construction rules. However, a player's secondary and tertiary decks must share at least 25 cards in common with their primary deck. In other words, secondary and tertiary decks must mirror the primary deck with up to 5 cards swapped out. It is important to point out that duplicate cards count when comparing to a primary deck. For example, if you want to include 2 copies of Twilight Drake in your secondary deck, and there are no copies of Twilight Drake in your primary deck, then you must spend 2 swaps to include both cards. Unique or not, if a card isn't in your primary deck, it counts towards the 5-card difference limit. A player's primary deck is important for another reason. Whenever a new match starts, both its players must begin by piloting their primary deck. Only after the first game concludes can you choose to swap into your secondary or tertiary deck. You do not announce which of your decks you will be using in the next game, and you do not have to swap. After every game, this process repeats, allowing players to swap or stay until the match concludes. Importantly, you can swap to any of your decks between games, primary, secondary, or tertiary, including returning to your primary deck if you have previously swapped out of it. And those are all the rules for Specialist, Hearthstone's new official competitive format. So what are you waiting for? Get out there and start brewing your own primary, secondary, and tertiary decks to get a jump start on the new format and innovate like the pros.
Let the battle begin!
We're back with game number 2 of Kolento versus BoarControl. Kolento has a 1-0 lead over BoarControl at the moment, and they are sticking on their primary decks here for Specialist. They will not be swapping to one of their other 2 available from the same class, which means that I think Boar is still in the exact same spot, in trouble.
Yeah, he's not looking all too good. It's not a situation we've seen all too much here with the kind of the budding start of Specialist format this year. A lot of players have had specific archetypes to switch into for Mage, specifically. A lot of the Warrior decks will put in Big Game Hunters and Super Colliders. Rogues might substitute in Walk the Planks. Basically just any removal that you can put in your deck in Specialist is a fantastic way to fight back against Mages. But for Hunter, your options are a little bit more limited, or I suppose I should say the primary deck is already teched to beat Mage, but it really doesn't feel like it's equipped to deal with it whatsoever.
Yeah, and Kolento throws away Giant even on the coin, and so that tells me that Kolento's mind wasn't exactly where I thought it was in game number 1, where he's looking for ways to fight for board. This isn't the way that he plays the game. He wants to find card draw, he wants to find ways to fight for board and generate an advantage. And I think that that's smart, because Kolento knows he's never playing an early Giant versus Boar. Why would he do that? Just slam a Giant, get a deadly shot. Wait for the Conjurer's calling.
Yeah.
Patience is a virtue.
I'm excited to see how it shakes out, because this is, I mean, I guess on ladder you're generally not facing too many Beast Hunters. And so a lot of the time the Deadly Shot, the Mountain Giant early on is a lot more powerful, but this is not the general thinking with this deck. You are looking on the coin for Giant and for Conjurer's Calling to get that as soon as possible. But like you said, it's very vulnerable in this strategy, so instead going for the early removal options with the Magic Dart Frog, popping off with the Sorcerer's Apprentice. It's a bold strategy.
I really like it. The more I see it, the more it makes sense. You know, Arcane Intellect and Banana Buffoon, I think, are such important cards. And with the Dart Frog, I feel like Kolento has found that one extra synergy piece that matches with what Banana Buffoon's trying to do.
Yeah.
Right now, its only synergy is basically filling up your hand, and then also with Mana Cyclone.
Yeah.
He's now added in something else that not only helps him fight for board, it allows him to mulligan very aggressively for early game stuff and take advantage of the fact that he's got Arcane Intellect.
Okay, and I think the other big difference with the standard decks, the decks that I'm playing on ladder and the one that Kolento has here, is Dart Frog. Because a lot of the time when you pop off with playing a whole bunch of early spells and Mana Cyclone, it doesn't actually achieve that much other than refilling your hand a lot of the time. The point is to get to where you can play Sea Giant. But when you do have the Dart Frog down, it can just help you to clear the board over and over again as you're cycling through these spells.
And Boar here has a much better start than in the previous game.
Much more like it.
I think going first is pretty vital to Hunter in a lot of situations because you just have so many 1-drops, and you want to go turn 1, play a minion, turn 2, play 2 more minions. That's a very common line you want with Hunter. And here he's got Stranglethorn Tiger and Dire Frenzy. So I feel like his pressure opportunity in this game is much higher than it was in the previous.
It's a weird one, because to an extent, I agree with you. Obviously, when you're going first, playing one of your 1-drops is much better because they all have 1 health. So if you're going second, the mage can just ping them going into their turn 2. But I also think that a lot of the 1-drops in Hunter are meant to be comboed. They're not meant to be played on one. Timberwolf and Springpaw, they're meant to go together to clear your opponent's board when they pull ahead. But even then, the logical next step in that thinking is, can you kill giants with Timberwolves and Springpaws? The answer is no.
Kolento goes to the Book of Specters with the Conjurer's Calling already in hand. Going to dig for the giant at this point. So he's sustained the early pressure. He's gotten what I would consider a pretty even board state, even though it looked like it could have ended pretty poorly for him.
Yeah.
And so here now, dig for the Mountain Giant. Look for the Giant Conjurer's Calling turn.
And he is. Kolento is really afraid of taking damage here, and I think this is actually what indicates what he's afraid of overall in this game plan, which is burst at the end of the game. If he takes too much chip damage early on, it doesn't matter how many Grave Horrors he gets, how many taunts he can put in play, he will be vulnerable to the burst damage from the double kill command in Boar's deck list. So I can understand his thinking here of just trying to, at all costs, mitigate the damage early on.
Oh boy. Wise of Boar's control Wise of Boar's control. Wise of Boar control to wipe out that Sorcerer's Apprentice in that turn. He deviated pretty heavily, paying a big respect to that minion. And that Mana Cyclone would have been the juice had he not.
It really would have been.
Ooh, there's a giant.
Yeah. Yeah. Not an especially powerful card, but 2 mana swap it into a giant. The cards that you burn off the top really don't matter too much as long as it's not Conjurer's Calling.
All right, look what it set up for him. Turn 6. Mountain Giant, Conjurer's Calling.
It's almost like that's a good combo that you should try and hold on to at the start of the game.
To be fair, though, I mean, he does need to find ways to fill up his hand. He still wants to fight for board. I like his mulligan strategy. I really do.
Personally, I'm actually quite unconvinced. I don't think I agree with it. Because the cards he had, they didn't draw through his deck. It wasn't like he was holding on to Arcane Intellect and stuff like that to get through to this combo. I personally feel like the real meat of the deck is the Mountain Giants. The cards he did hold on to, I think were perfectly reasonable to hold on to. But I think when you have a good hand like that, let's hold on to the Giant as well. Let's just have the mid-game plan of Giant plus Conjurers.
Don't disagree. I'm on the fence. The point is, Kolento's starting to convince me. It's like yesterday when I was starting to convince you of things, and you really disliked it. I like being convinced in this instance, because this is very much against what I would normally think.
Yes.
I don't think I've ever mulliganed a Mountain Giant in a deck that plays Mountain Giant, except for Even Warlock versus Odd Rogue months back.
Yes. That card was not Amethyst Spellstone, I agree.
Big turn.
Yep, I like going for the Elemental Evocation as well, to be able to get down the mirror images, assuming that he will.
So he wants the mirror image to get the Sea Giants in play on the following turn. So he's looking for specifically to swing the game next turn. Like here, he develops tension on the board and tries to fight against it.
And he is going to be taking a lot of damage for this play.
Indeed.
Look at this hand! So what? He's got 10 on board, each unleash. Well, the first unleash is
3.
Doubled because of the Timberwolf, so 6.
Oh yeah, excuse me, 6.
There's not enough board space to play the second one for full value. But, I mean, even if BoarControl can't go for lethals here, obviously he can clear both of these giants. I don't know. I mean, for Kolento here, not only would the mirror image have protected his face from the damage of these minions, it would also have made it a little bit harder for the deadly shot to take out the giants.
It makes Unleash you know, basically the same card. Like, your mirror image doesn't do anything in the face of Unleash because the Timberwolves in play.
Okay. Okay, I see your point. I see your point.
So
But then they start running into board space issues because it makes double Unleash less good because the 2 mirror images just soak up 2 of the hounds anyway.
The long story short is that he didn't get a Grave Harbor here, and so he couldn't protect the Mana Cyclone, so he had no protection from Deadly Shot in this spot.
It's a good point.
So BoarControl gets the payoff of having Deadly Shots in the deck, and now Kolento's right on the back foot again, having to figure out where he goes from here. He doesn't have another big swing turn in the immediacy, so it's going to look tough for him for the rest of this game.
And if there's one thing I will say about Kolento is that he fully realizes the power of that exact card he picked up, Khadgar. Saving the mirror image was good if he exactly found Khadgar off the top, because he can go Khadgar, mirror images, and I think possibly also a giant in the same turn there.
Because 4 discounted mana.
Well, 5 with the Khadgar thrown in there as well. Even able to play the Scorch as well.
Or a banana if you'd so like.
Both tempting options.
Someone asked me if I wanted a frozen banana, and I said yes, but not because I want a frozen banana now, but because I might want one for later. And Boar, I think the mirror image here looks a lot better now that the Timberwolf's gone. I'm afraid again.
Yeah, it's really all starting to fall apart from it again. It looks like having to mark shot just the Khadgar.
I think he's still in this one, like, very reasonably. I didn't even see what the other options were.
I mean, you know, we can see him get back the Master's Dire Frenzy or a dog off the Unleash the Hounds into Master's calling it back to hand to get a 4/4 charger for 1 mana.
All right, well.
And none of these give Taunt. There are no 10-drop Taunt options, I believe, to get off of the Sea Giant Conjurer's Calling.
Can you make enough 10 drops that you just kill him?
Well, I think he's more afraid about just dying. Obviously,
right, so you trade?
Doesn't have first.
Because he can Sea Giant as well, so he's more interested in using a hero power than a Sea Giant. For me, this spells a counterattack for Kolento. That's his opportunity to win. And he's fearing exactly double kill command in this spot.
Or another, sorry, off of the Master's Call, a Timberwolf that's been buffed up.
Yes.
Or just drawn naturally from the deck.
Oh.
That's decent.
Big Bad Archmage can certainly do it.
Yeah, obviously you can get a bunch of taunts off of that. We could also see Mulch Muncher.
Oh, boy.
Those are big. Those are pretty big. We're definitely starting to look towards lethal on the following turn if BoarControl cannot end the game now. 1 mana off of the giant plus ping.
Observe and reflect.
And he's just calculating discrete numbers here.
And that's the thing, is like Kolento has to make a choice. Does he want to counter push for lethal or save himself for 1 turn? And the way I look at this is I'm like, what does 1 more turn actually do for you? Why not push for damage? But maybe this is exactly why not push for damage. But if you're at 2 or 1, that's the same thing if you can't kill.
So Master's Call gets another Timberwolf, and that means there's 15 attack on board after you play both the Timberwolves. Hero Power is 1 off of lethal. Oh no, but if you go for the Direwolf, that's exact lethal. The Dire Frenzy. That's 15 plus the 3 is up to 18 for the exact amount of damage to close things out.
So Kolento could not have protected himself in this
with
position.
the extra ping.
Even with the extra ping. BoarControl answers back. And it's the proactive aggression that allows him to do so. He obtains the board control, and then on the turn where Kolento has to go for Giant Conjurer's Calling, he doesn't find a taunt, and he's able to run over the Mana Cyclone, double Deadly Shot, and have full control from there.
And I think BoarControl very well realized what his game plan should have been there, going for the Timberwolf into Dire Frenzy early on, thinking a lot of the time Mage does actually go very wide on board, and unless they're hitting the Mountain Giant with the Conjurer's Calling, which obviously has a 50% chance to get the Grave Horror at any point, or 75% chance to get at least one of them. You're not going to have too many taunts in the way, which means the Unleash the Hounds can go for a huge amount of damage and close out the game very nicely indeed.
I really like the way that Boar played that one, and I think that going first gives him a little bit more of an opportunity. I really think the attacker's initiative is important for BoarControl in this one, even though the coin is important for Kolento. So Game 3 is going to be coming up. Quick break, and then we're going to find out who takes this series. BoarControl, first Hunter win in the European region. Don't go anywhere.
One night, I was called on to scry. But what is this symbol I spy? It's my own crystal ball. Yes, I'll answer the call. And the others will come by and by. That's right. We be calling a team in. The Masters of Plotting and Scheming. By this candle a-glowing, I surely be knowing whose gold will be once more a-gleaming.
My name is Christos Sakopoulos. My battle tag is Fenomeno21327. My username comes from when I was a kid. I used to go to like an internet cafe with my friends to play like, I remember WoW and stuff like that. And I just had to make a character one day, and one of my friends said, your plays are phenomenal, so you can just put the name Fenomeno there. And I just did it, and then it just stuck. The thing that's unique about my playstyle, I feel, is that I sometimes think about stupid plays that other people would never even consider, and I try to get something out of it. I think people don't pay attention to details like trading or going face. I really pay attention to those things because I think it's super important. Like even one bad trade can cost you the game a lot of times. My favorite memory was definitely when I won my first Hearthstone tournament last year in HCT Orange County. And doing that just gave me so much more confidence and made me feel like I was free again. I'd say being in Grandmasters means that I've made it to the top players of Europe, which has always been my goal. So yeah, I'm looking forward to start competing again.
It's European Grandmasters here for Hearthstone. Fino, one of the first players that we had up to a 2-0 score, and did it with Mage. And now Kolento looking to follow in those footsteps and do the exact same thing. And I really feel the sentiment that he had right there, because I remember I was casting at that event that he had won in Orange County, and it was quite an important moment because both Casey and Fino had been chasing that the entire year long for that, and to see both of them in that finals, it was kind of bittersweet because I'm like, both these players I feel like deserve it, and here they both are in Grandmasters due to their phenomenal years that they had.
They really did have good years indeed. And one of the things I love about the mages that we're seeing in specialist format here is Fino and Kolento, both doing very well so far, play vastly different styles with this deck. They are just miles apart in the way they're playing. Kolento throwing away his Mountain Giant when he's on the coin, going for much more tricksy plays, like small little things that he can do to swing the game in his favor, as opposed to the much more brute force style of play that Fino throws down of just getting everything on board as quick as he can.
Yep, and like I said, we're in specialist format here, so you have 3 decks of the same class. Your other 2 are 5 cards different from the first deck that you play. You have to play that initial deck. But all the players have stuck on their primary decks both times, so running the same 30 cards, saying this is the best chance I have in the matchup. And so here early on, BoarControl is back on coin. And this time his hand looks a lot better, I think, than it did the previous time he was on coin. He's got both animal companions.
Yep, I mean, if you remember too, kind of similarly against...
Keep going, keep going.
I was going to say a matchup that was kind of similar to this one was the mid-range hunter against Q-Block in the previous meta, where one of the best hands you could have, or even lock as well, was fairly similar, was coin Animal Companion, Dire Frenzy, because you just killed them. And that's kind of what you're trying to do here as well. We saw for BoarControl in the last game, the only way that he was realistically going to be getting there was through ending it in the mid-game, and this is a hand that absolutely does that.
Yep. And Kolento is going to eat the damage and set up for the big turn next turn.
Fully agree. Because next turn, this turn is so huge. Look at this hand.
Yeah.
He just vomits everything onto the board.
Now, I will say, BoarControl with a second Huffer here and Unleash the Hounds in hand, he's a Timberwolf away from being able to turn back what Kolento's going to do right here.
This hand's pretty juicy. If either of these Huffers survives, obviously the Dire Frenzy is absolutely nuts.
The Sea Giant picked up as well. I mean, can he have like the major pop-off here?
I don't think he has enough mana because he's not going Khadgar mirror images to get the Giant
it's
down.
going to depend on what the Mana Cyclone brings. If the Mana Cyclone brings more mirror images.
I don't think he'd be able to. He doesn't have enough board space because even if he gets the full 7 board or the full 6 spaces filled, still not enough mana with the Giant. But I appreciate your point that next turn, very possibly we are going to be seeing that.
That is just huge. And Boar's face, I think, is spot on for what he just saw.
Those are a decent few options as well.
Yeah, the Luna's Pocket Galaxy on the far right,
It's a little expensive.
If you have like a turn where like you just nothing's going on and you just have a setup, I think it can work. But outside of that, I don't think it's going to be delivering much. And BoarControl finds a Timberwolf, but it can't be used this turn. And I really got to feel that.
I mean, it's got to be Timberwolf. It has to be the Timberwolf there, right? Because you want to go Dire Frenzy plus Timberwolf, and then try and get a big Unleash the Hounds play like you did last game. Man, but leaving alive a Sorcerer's Apprentice feels absolutely dreadful.
Polymorph's not so good in the matchup.
Yeah.
It was actually, I think, are cluttering the hand right now for Kolento. And at 16, he's not exactly at a comfortable life total. You know, like I look at Timberwolf Unleash the Hounds, and I think to myself, how much damage can BoarControl just set up and push? You know, like a kill command and some hero powers can really put Kolento in trouble.
And that is exactly what Kolento is calculating with this unexpected results in hand. Against a lot of decks, you'd obviously just turbo that onto the board, but he does need to be careful about giving his opponent a little bit too much stuff with these Unleash the Hounds here. But Kolento is going absolutely all in on the board here. This could be a pretty major punish. Here we go. BoarControl not messing around with the Dire Frenzy or any of that nonsense. He is just going to be trying to, well, I guess push everything face.
I mean, this is like the moment of truth right here. Because if he doesn't trade stuff off, Kolento's has an opportunity with all the random spells to clear out the board. And you're pretty likely to have something that's going to fight. So you get to exchange one Wolf to push off 2 minions. And now you have to decide, once again, do you go face or do you trade?
So if he goes all face, Sea Giant costs 1 mana for Kolento on the backswing.
If you trade twice, it costs 5 though, and that's I think right at the sweet spot for BoarControl, where he can't use the Sea Giant and a hero power.
Or Sea Giant plays Hunters quickly. It's immensely difficult. Like, he has no burst in hand, so pushing the 6 to face very possibly just doesn't work out. But I guess the next step in his thinking is, if my opponent does go for a big Sea Giant play, as long as they're leaving my minions on board, I'm happy.
But this is the punish, is Kolento has exactly Arcane Explosion in hand. So it's Sea Giant, Arcane Explosion, push face for 3, and you're looking at having 11 damage on board with your opponent at 20, and you're at 12 and they have nothing.
Right, so how does it break out? If Sea Giant Conjurer's Calling comes down, obviously the the Timberwolf gets killed and one of the dogs. 3 damage on board. Kill command is not lethal then. Double kill command is lethal.
He's got Arcane Explosion though.
Oh, so you think he just plays the Giant and goes for the...
Well, yeah, he just blows up the whole board and gets an 8/8.
Yeah.
That's like a death wing.
It's a little bit less aggressive. Like, it possibly doesn't set up 2-turn lethal, whereas if he's not afraid of double kill command, he could try and go for a 2-turn lethal setup.
I think you should be afraid of double kill command here.
Okay, I think so you think he should assume he's that far ahead where he can just lock the game up?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
Because BoarControl, if he's got 2 turns after his board gets cleared, I'd be pretty surprised. And honestly, I think BoarControl is going to be quite upset when he sees that this much time was taken for this, but Kolento has a lot of options.
I think it's actually quite close though, because you are unlikely to be dead on the backswing there, but I can fully see your point that a second Timberwolf could come down plus kill command. This is the safer route overall.
Yeah, and Boar is just in major trouble. Like, nothing he does sticks to the board anymore. So he's got to find a way to deliver lethal blow, and that to me means that you have to be weaving in hero powers.
So is he looking at Shimmerfly stuff, just trying to get a some kind of a miracle spell off of that?
The other argument to it is that with 4/6 rush lifesteals in your deck, you buy more time. More time means more hero powers. It means more draws. That means more damage. But Kolento, with the hand he has, doesn't really give more time.
Boar is gonna start dying very quickly indeed.
For Kolento, it's 4 10 drops. The only thing you're thinking about then is going to be
Second
double kill
Unleash.
command turns, second unleash Timberwolf.
Yeah. So if he value trades the 4/4 here with his Sea Giant, goes for double Conjurer's Call, on average, does he set up lethal then on the following turn with 3 10-drop minions? I think it might be
3 10 drops is going to average about 7. I'm just going to guess. Let's just say it's 7.5 attack.
Right. So I would say
yes.
on average, because he heals up to 28, then goes down to 27. So he would need to get up to 26 with the hero power as well to be able to close out the game. I think that's decent odds to be able to do that, but far from guaranteed.
This works too.
Sure. Whatever he does, he just wants to put a lot of attack power on.
So now that he sees, which is a Mulch Muncher that gets to trade off as well.
BoarControl does not like to see that. He doesn't even have to go for the Polymorph now. He could just value trade and then go for a second Conjurer's Call.
The Polymorph is effectively damage in this spot too. That stops the Unleash.
It's an alternate line to be going for here, which is, again, not quite so aggressive, but it still does manage to put, how much damage is this in play now? 18 lethal damage unless BoarControl manages to do something, and with that counter spell in play, he cannot do anything.
Because I think looking at this with the Deadly Shot draw and the Hakar on board, the way that Boar has like that very, very fringe lethal out would have been Deadly Shot onto Hakar, weave in the hero power, and hope Kolento just starts ripping Corrupted Bloods.
Yeah. I really like this from Kolento because by going for the Conjurer's Call first, it meant if he got 2 really bad 10 drops that had low attack value, like say for example 2 Kalagos that wouldn't have delivered lethal, he could have changed his plan. He didn't have to go for the counter spell there. He could have instead gone for a second Conjurer's Call.
I like also seizing the damage from the Giant.
It was brave, but it had backup options because if he didn't get the Mulch Muncher, he could have still polymorphed. He didn't have to take the damage. Every outcome there was covered by Kolento's line of play. And BoarControl, he knows it's over.
There was 17, 18, yeah, it's 19 on board. He just has to hope Kolento does not see that, but
he's gonna.
He just pushed 8 last turn in the face of that. That means Kolento is gonna defeat BoarControl by a score of 2-1, move up to 2-0 on match record as well, and keep Mage looking absolutely dominant in the opening week at Grandmasters.
I expected it to do well. I cannot say I expected it to do quite as well as it's done. It just seems that even excluding the flexibility, which is what I think makes it such a good specialist deck, being able to switch things up against the Warriors and Rogues in your secondary and tertiary decks, even then, just in the primary deck, the raw power level just seems to be really high.
Yeah, apparently Carnivorous Cube was a very good card, and when you give it to Mage as a
twice
used 3-mana spell, it's still pretty good. So we've got Kolento ready for an interview. Kolento, can you hear us?
Yes, hello guys.
Congratulations on your second win here at Grandmasters. Talk to me about this matchup a little bit and your mulligan strategies. We saw you throw a Mountain Giant a couple times, and we're curious about that.
Yeah, so Mountain Giant is actually kind of an ability in the early game because if you can't handle this, like if you saw early Huffers and like if they just stick 1 minion to the board, they can remove everything you play. They're pretty good at removing stuff, those hunters. So if you're keeping the Giant, you have to keep cards in your hand. You can spend them, right? And if you can't clear the board, you just die out eventually. And you can just go for 1 Giant. You have to do late game setups like I did in the first game, right?
And so with you now 2-0 in match records and Mage doing incredibly well, how are you feeling about the deck overall going forward? Do you think it's going to be rising in popularity, or will the counters start to come into play?
Oh, you think there are not enough counters? BoarControl had his best deck against mine as a primary deck.
Do you think it's strong
People
enough?
expect Mage already. Yeah, I think Mage is good. You can...
No, the Hunter. Do you believe the Hunter was strong enough? Do you think people are going to have to dedicate more more effort to countering Mage, or do you think they're just going to have to play Mage?
I don't think Hunter is good enough. I don't know, I played it on Nether. I lost like 8 games in a row.
That's been my experience as well. Losing lots of games in a row with it. But Mage seems pretty good to me. You showed up with a strong performance, and you did it with even some unique choices in there. And I'm learning a bit about the mulligan strategy as well in matchups where you anticipate aggression from your opponent. Kolento, thank you very much for your time. Congratulations, and I look forward to seeing you next week.
Thank you guys, see you later.
There you have it. Hunter's just not good enough.
I feel like he's always trying to get us with a little bit of zinger. He's like, what do you mean? Boar had his best deck against me as his primary deck, and I won. And I was like, no, I'm not asking about the Mage. I'm asking about the Hunter.
Yeah, he has an incredibly dry sense of humor. I'm English, and it's too much for me.
It's not too much for me. I love it. Kolento he's a smart guy. Magic Dart Frogs. How on earth do you win with that? You got to be Kolento, apparently. So that's our first match of the book. We got 5 more today that are coming up for you, though. Our next one is going to be Viper versus Boston. Both players seeking their opening wins here at Grandmasters for the European region. Don't go anywhere.